Who in this room loves Scrum? Yay, everybody, yeah. So, if you look at Scrum, So if you look at Scrum and your Scrum Board, to be exact, who uses a test column or a verify column like that? Okay, so my 10-minute talk is about actually trying to get rid of those testing columns. It's going to be really interesting. Here we go. So first off, I would like to start thinking about the waterfall process first. Try to imagine your testing column and your Scrum board next to this slide. You probably see some of the similarities. I do see most of the time different teams struggling with testing because they didn't really change anything when we look at the waterfall process. So most of the companies, they decided to change towards using Scrum. And the basic reason behind it is that they wanted to change something because their competitors were actually delivering really fast. And at some point, you want to compete those competitors. So you start moving away from the waterfall process, and then you end up using Scrum, for instance. So one thing I noticed, and it made me start thinking about what Scrum is all about. And you can have lots of philosophical discussions about what Scrum is about. But to me, it's about becoming predictable. So every time you do sprint planning, you want to be predictable at the end of the sprint. So basically knowing upfront what you're going to deliver. So I once watched this movie called Avengers, probably, and you see these Avengers here in the background. At some point, Hulk said to his team, guys, we're not a team, we're a ticking time bomb. And sometimes when I work in teams using Scrum, I do feel like a time bomb. Because especially when you have this testing column at the end of every work you do, you basically move all your testing towards the end. And especially when testers also come up with test cases during a sprint. How can you ever become predictable? That's really, kind of worrying me a bit. So becoming predictable is really important to me when I use Scrum. So did we really change? I don't think so. Again, if you imagine those steps you do, these different phases, we still keep doing the same thing we were doing before. And if you want to beat your competitor because they are quicker at delivering their software, you need to change something. We can do so much better. So who of you have witnessed these kinds of water Scrum falls? Yeah, I really hate that. And I must say, the tasks are, it's not real, but actually one of the things you notice here is that testing becomes a real bottleneck. And actually I was the person who was responsible for that, because when I first started working with Scrum teams, I was really taking responsibility of all the quality, like the quality assurance. Every single task needs to be verified by me, taking all the responsibility. And if you look at the Agile testing philosophy, it should be a team responsibility, in my opinion. So and one of the things I also notice in Scrum teams, and especially when you use testing columns in your process, testing becomes a separate activity, which is not. Testing is not a separate activity. It's something you always do. Jürgen Appello told us this morning. It's something you always do. And it doesn't matter, everybody tests. So I worked with this developer a couple of weeks ago, and he said to me, sorry, Kishen, but testing is not my job. And this brilliant guy, he said it to me. I was thinking, hey, but how can this brilliant guy tell this to me? And then I looked at my Scrum board and seeing all these testing and verify columns. I basically said, hey, it makes sense because we kind of facilitate that kind of attitude. There's also something needs to be said about testers as well. I was once like this, being this police officer all the time. Like I said during the slide with the Scrum waterfall. I'm the only one responsible for the quality, and that should be a team effort, in my opinion. I also saw something with a team last week. So you have one team, but within that team you have two different teams. So one team only building their development code and doing their unit testing and integration testing, and some other team basically building their own automation framework. And I'm not saying that it's a bad thing, but I would like to see that more collaboratively, being more collaborative and more thinking about where we could speed up testing our product. And one other thing I'm worried about is that at some point you'll have two truths of the tests. So one handled by the development team and the other the automation team. So basically, I'm repeating again what Joerg already said this morning. Everybody tests. So developers, testers, stakeholders. I think business analysts, they also need to get more into testing, in my opinion. Maybe we should stop calling it testing. So Goiko's books are all about that. So we need to focus more on that. Specification by example is a perfect way of doing that. So it all comes down to collaboration, in my opinion. So I used here Batman and Robin. So on the left side, I don't want to see testers slapping developers all the time of their code being crap and stuff like that. I just want to see more of Batman and Robin sitting next to each other and pairing with each other and feeling really confident in what they do and learning from each other and feeling confident that they will make the sprint and become predictable. So this last slide, I like this slide. It's Henry Ford's quote, "Coming together is a beginning. Keeping together is a progress." So in order to keep your team together, get rid of the testing column. That's my advice. And working together is success. So I hope it convinced you to at least rethink your whole testing column on your Scrum board. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions for Kishen?
Hi. Question is, when you mean removing testing column, it just means removing just the column itself, but not task, yes? So, I mean, just task can be taken by anyone. It could be developer or a tester. Did you mean that?
I was hoping more both. Just try. I would like to see more testers pairing with developers. That's basically what I'm saying. And if you have this testing column, you're basically facilitating that attitude that, you know, the example I gave you with the developer, saying, "Oh no, it's not my job." So by pairing with testers a lot, you probably get more collaboration and learning from each other. So yes, I do agree. At some point, the task itself, it could be, you'll have the same effect, but it's even worse if you have this testing column and we shift our work to other people. So you need to think about it collaboratively.
Yeah. The only thing that I noticed from my experience is that this mindset of developers comes from point that QA engineers are not able to help them in their work. They think that if they cannot help me, why should I help to test them, to test their stuff? It comes that if testers will be able to write the code and help them in their part of work, then they will be also more open to.
Yeah. Want to keep this short a little bit as part of the idea. So please meet up for the rest of the day. Okay, thank you, Kishen. Now I have a logistic challenge. I have two microphones. Thankfully, I have two hands. And now Maike is going to surprise us. And your session is already up. And here is the...
I don't need.
You don't need. Okay.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Before I start with presenting some golden rules of how to write a good user story, good in the meaning that your development team decides, yeah, we would like to implement it during the sprint planning meeting 1. We give our commitment. Before I will do this, I would like to introduce myself a little bit, that you understand the motivation for my contribution of the consensus talk. I'm working since 2009, mainly as business analyst and product owner. And in 2009, 2010, I made a lot of good experience with Scrum teams. And then I changed the company, I changed the project, I changed the customer, and I went in another Scrum team. There starts with gaining a bad experience with Scrum, because I went into the team and I get the information or the command, please ensure that the teams implement the ongoing user stories. I was really surprised about to hear this. Why? The teams often decide to reject the user story because they do not understand, they were contradictory, they were not complete. And so there was a lot of frustration in this project, and I went in, and at the beginning it was my job to assure that user stories will be implemented, also if I don't understand them. So this was a really hard task for me, but in this time I think I learned the most, because I listened to the people, I heard their question about what they are missing with facts, with information, what was not understandable, what was a contradiction for them, and I gained all this information, keep it in mind, and then I came into modus to write my own user stories, assure that the team accept them, give their commitment and implement them. It becomes better and better. So that's the good part of that. The bad part is I didn't work alone. There were other product owners, because we were a high distributed team with 8 Scrum teams. We had Scrum of Scrum. We worked with developers in India and in Munich and in Saxony. And when I was sitting together with the peers, I heard often, I have not a chance to get my user story implemented. Why does it not work? And that's the reason why I start with collecting some golden rules for the user story. The first one, which I would like to present, is start very early with implementing a list with terms which you define together with the team. Means at the end, start with writing a glossary. And if it's only a mini glossary, but at first, get a common understanding, find a common language with your team. If you don't have that, you always run against the wall, independent what you want, what you want to implement. If your team do not understand you, you have no chance. In the past, I saw often the trial that it started, There's a glossary somewhere in the wiki, but nobody looks like. And nobody maintains it, nobody takes care of it. Terms changing in the meaning will be enriched with some more information. And by time to time, the people thinking they are understanding each other, but if you come to the roots, or if you really ask, do you understand me, you find out that's not the case. So that's my first recommendation. Beside the user story, start with writing and maintaining a glossary. And always make a reference in your user story if you see, I use this term, but I cannot be assured that I will be well understood. Then add the reference, add it to the user story, and the developer, also a tester, has a chance to read in detail this information. That's my first advice. The second advice is when you have a application with a lot of interfaces, where you sometimes have the feeling you get lost because you don't know how many interfaces do you have, how many features are implemented in which component, or which data goes over which interface. Then also start with writing or designing, modeling a context diagram, and always reference it in your user story. Make clear when your user story is about a certain interface, like you have a multi-channel application and you would like to have a feature which is available about the online portal or for SMS, write it in the user story. This is not a restriction for the implementation, but your developer knows where you are in the big picture, for which interface you want this feature. Another rule goes in the same direction, but comes from the other side. Developers feel very often too too much restricted by the business analyst or by the product owner. Because the product owner, if it's the best case or the worst case, was either also a developer in an earlier stage, or he was a tester, or he knows all the facts from the other phase of the waterfall model. And he's often motivated to write the user story in a very detailed level. And then you as developer has to read a lot of pages. You don't have the time, you don't like to read it. And then the developer starts with ignoring your user story. They only read the line, and then they start with implementing, and in the acceptance test, you find out, okay, he never read your user story because it was too long. It was with too many facts about the implementation. So then bring it down only to the facts what you want. And if then your development team says in the Scrum meeting, I don't understand what you really want, then give him more information, but not start in the beginning with the big picture. Give also the team a chance to ask, and then listen to the questions, and then give more and more information. You don't need to give him all at the beginning. Yeah. So, what's about my time? 3 minutes? Okay. Another golden rule which comes up is so simple, but is also often forgotten, or it's not the time therefore, or there are a lot of excuses, but I'm quite sure if you don't fulfill it, you always run in the loop to rework your user story. You start with your discussion. Ask maybe one developer of your Scrum team in advance about a feature which you would like to implement. Only ask him some question about, do you think it's feasible? What it's your idea about testing? Is it testable? Get all this information in advance, consider it in writing your user story, and I'm quite sure your team is very happy to get such a detailed user story, which is considering the different perspectives, but got not in too much details. Yeah, that's from my side.
Okay, we have some time available for questions, yes.
Thank you for your presentation. I have a question. How agile, in your opinion, a story should be? Because our developers very often complain that product changes their mind too often, and product insists that we're working agile, so we should be able to adjust our requirements on the fly. So sometimes they want to implement something vertically, then horizontally, then they change their mind and say, oh, just adjust it, like, this way. And for developer, it's totally changing and re-implementing the story. So how do you deal with this conflict?
This is, for me, always a balance between discipline and between be agile. Discipline means if I have a sprint from 2 weeks, yeah, in the Agile manifest, it's written there in that way. In these 2 weeks, it's like your team become a biotope. Biotope, hope is the right word. In this time, you shouldn't disturb it too much, yeah. You shouldn't bring always other opinions or decisions in this team. 2 weeks is not really much, yeah? And if you have really a big change, I think this big change will not be introduced in the team very often in that way. And normally it goes in that direction that the business analyst has then to explain why he wants this change so early, and then you bring it always down, and then you realize, okay, it's not really this big change, it's maybe some additional feature he wants. And this additional feature you can then bring in the next sprint. I think you don't really need always to disturb the developer. It's not really necessary. But yeah, it depends how, maybe often the guys are very big and have are very loud, yeah, and then they think they are right, but they are not really right.
Okay, thank you, Maike. Okay, next one is, want to keep it short and simple. Next one is Joerg. And you want your slides already? Yeah.
Yes, hello everybody. Software without bones. So Maike beat my goal to have the most less slides on this conference. I have only 2, plus first one and last one. I also have to introduce myself because that needs to be understood, right? So as I started in the mid of 80s, I started not as a software tester, what I'm today. I started as a specialist for food technique. So I was at a food manufacturer producing fish fingers. Who's knowing what fish fingers are? Or for Germans, Fischstäbchen. Okay. So I work at the biggest fish finger manufacturing company of the world, and we were 1,000 employees and only 30 testers. So how do that work? I think what we have to learn in the software engineering is that testing or quality must be a part of our work. So you have to produce quality in all your things you are doing. If you have only 30 quality assurance members and you have 140 tons of fish you produce every day, I think then you have to take care about the quality, because you have to think about your customer. The customer is a child. So a child, if it would eat a fish with a bone, with a head bone, would die. So then you have to take care about, okay, if my customer is a child and I don't have to bring in bones because it could die, then which strategy you want to drive with your quality assurance members? 0 defects. That's what I have learned. And then 10 years later, I moved to the IT industry. First sentence, oh, we are delivering software, but there are bugs in. What's that? Bugs? Why? Yes, the testers are not fast enough. So we have to deliver software. We found 70% of our major issues, but the 30% we do not found. So why not? You're asking too many questions. So that's my approach, how to get good software outside. In the software industry, I have heard 1 tester and 7 developers. Is it familiar with you? And a Scrum team, 7. 1 tester, 2 testers maybe. Pardon? Okay. I'm 1 tester and I have 30 developers. So it makes no sense that I do the quality assurance. It makes no sense that I do testing, because it does not scale. So what we have learned is to produce quality in each step we do. How we do that? I'm looking to my old industry where I've worked 10 years before. Now it's 15 years. So then we write plans for the developers how to test. I coach them how to get a 0 defect strategy. We know that we never would reach that, but we have the goal to have as less defects as possible, and we're looking sometimes to other businesses. How do they do that? For example, in my old business, every production employee has to wash his hands. That's a quality step. Every production employee is knowing that food on the ground has nothing to do on the production line. That's a quality step. So if you take that in mind, and your developers take that in mind, they will also try to produce good quality code lines. The only thing I have to do, or another developer, but not the same, is to check. And after we have checked it, we have to protect it, we have to manage it. Manage means, in the presentation before, you have heard about user stories and stuff like that. In the food industry, you cannot start just change a user story. You have to take care about, because the machines they will be produced for you are very, very expensive, more expensive than the most expensive enterprise business software in the industry. So what we do, we try the right thing to avoid defects from the beginning. Maybe some of you were at Niels Malotot's presentation in the morning. He has referenced an old book. It's from the 70s. And also, I think that here are some presentations thinking about old things and new ways. So I think the software industry has to take care about maybe to look at other businesses. That's what I'm doing. So I have no solution for you. I have just a step where you can start with. Another example. Markus Gärtner said he is testing his test code. If you produce food, you have to test or prove quality, check quality of every ingredient you put into the product. Every. That means salt, pepper, milk, water, everything. You have to build in checks that you take care that the quality does not go down with the ingredients. You remember, if a defect is in the food product, you will hear that the next decades. You remember maybe there was Alete from Nestlé, or Zott, the milk products. The people have a negative mindset if they hear about that, and they wouldn't buy your product in future. If you take that in your mind with your quality process, I think you will have a better quality process. So I think, and that's my message to you, it's better to look also at classical businesses and to adopt, and that's what we hear also in the morning, to adopt and to combine techniques to assure the quality. And that means firstly, and you have said that, remove testing. Testing must be a part of every and each step you do. That's it.
Thank you, Joerg. We have time for one question.
What does manage mean on your presentation?
Manage, you have to have 30 quality people, because there are lawyers. They want to have that every 20 minutes a human should be at a production line, for example. Or in energy markets, I produce for the energy markets, we have regulatory lawyers. So you have to take care about also to fulfill such things. And that's managing. You have to fulfill the regulatories.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Joerg. We go on with Brindusa, and she's going to tell us a tale. Yeah?
Hopefully not the sleepy one.
No. Okay. You need this one?
Yes, please. Okay. So hi, I'm Bri. Thank you for coming here today. I'm here to tell you a story of an Agile tester, which happens to be my story. But before I go into it, I'd like to ask how many of you are working in Agile teams now? Okay, quite a lot of you. I'm not surprised, it's Agile testing day, right? And how many of you are happy with it? Okay, quite a lot. I'll be quite interested to see if your stories are similar to mine. So, as many of you probably, I've not always been an Agile tester, right? My first project was a waterfall project. So when I started looking at how waterfall looks like, it's pretty simple to follow and to understand. You know, you have all these perfected steps. They flow from one to another, and at the end, you have a shiny new product, happy customers. But in reality, it wasn't really as I suppose it's going to be. It was quite dysfunctional. When it was getting to the testing phase, not only that I was the bad energy maker, the troublemaker, people were looking at me when I was coming and, no, you're finding bugs again, we are going to have delays. I was working overtime quite a lot, and I was working even on Saturdays. And in Romania, like in other countries, Saturday is not a regular working day. So the gate of my enterprise were closed, and I didn't have the key, so I had to jump the fence to get in to actually be able to work. And there was no unicorn there serving me, neither with my testing or with my fence breaking. So while I was looking to find solutions for my problem, how can I get better and stop doing so many awful things with so many people, I bumped into Agile. And it was talking about collaboration, cross-functional teams with goals of having 0 bugs, happiness. So I said, Eureka, I found it, right? This is the environment that I want to be in. So I started looking for opportunities, and they soon came. And there is this saying, you know, you can put lipstick on a pig, but it's still a pig. So that's how I would sum up my situation there. You know, they were having Scrum stand-up meetings, reviews, retrospectives, product owners, Scrum masters, all sitting in the same environment, but nothing that was supposed to be happening was happening. It was like playing waltz on a rock music. You know, everything seemed to be totally wrong. So for my story, it brought no improvement. There was no collaboration. Nothing was going on in the way that I expected to be. So I was quite upset. You know, I've even moved country to join that team, and I didn't know what to do. Frustration was really getting high. But one day, the frustration brought home to me that, you know, I can do something about it. Being Agile is about taking responsibility. It's about inspecting and adapting and making steps in the right direction. So once I had this revelation, I started looking around in my team, and I realized there were some other people there that were quite frustrated with the situation as well. So the other thing that was going on was we had huge problems with demos. You know, we were getting a bunch of requirements at the beginning thrown over the wall, and in 1.5 months' time, the product owner will come and say, well, this is not what I want. Where did you read that? So the first thing that we tried is improve collaboration. So since we had this pain that we were all sharing, it was quite easy to start and discussing about requirements before we actually started developing them. And from that to designing tests together, it was quite an easy step. You know, most of the time, because I was so disconnected from them, I was finding lots of bugs towards the end of the sprint, and they couldn't understand why. So by telling them up front what am I going to test, it helped a lot. From that to code reviews, pair testing and pair programming wasn't really that much of a step. So all these activities brought us very close together. And Marcus earlier on told you even more of what can you do if you're finding yourself in that situation. And you know, my fence jumping didn't stop in my first waterfall project. It continued in my Agile project. There was no fence, but I was still going on Saturdays. So towards the end of the sprint, most of the time we had to come Saturdays to run regression suite because we had no automation. So when we thought about bringing in test automation, it was a very easy buy-in. Nobody had to be convinced. We all pulled together, and we've done it. And that was to get our weekends back. And all of this brought velocity increase, quality in both our code, our product, and our work life, and happiness. So now looking back, it has passed quite a few years since. After my first Agile baptism, companies are in a very similar situation even now, although Agile has become mainstream by now. And it's still because of the change of the mindset. And this is what I think testers can step in and do their best, because we have the broad cumulative experience that makes us see solutions and experiment. So the biggest thing that has actually changed from waterfall to Agile is that we are actually a member of the software development table. We are not hidden in a room far away with no windows, executing something that nobody else knows. We are part of the game. And more than this, we have our ideas and our proposition in our products. Our teams are affected by the way we think and what we propose. And this brings tremendous advantage to us and to our team. And there is no point not embracing the change. It's there and it's coming, and this is all we can do. And there is no really an end to a story, because it's a continuous movement. But if you're finding yourself in a team that is not the way that you think or you hope you should be, step up. There is always something you can do. And if you're finding yourself alone, shout. There is a great community out there. You can see here. You can ask people. They can give you advice. They can even coach you on Skype or on email, whatever you need. If that doesn't help, read. There are so many materials and books out there full of ideas that you can start putting in practice today. And don't forget to experiment. We are not experimenting in Agile only with our products, our customers. We are experimenting with our behavior, the way we see the world, out of the box rather than in the box. And most of all, enjoy. We spend most of our time at work. The day is 8 hours at work, if not 9, 10, or 12, 2 hours at home and then sleeping. So you should make the most of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brie. Any people with questions? No, but I have one. Did I hear you say you actually moved to a different country to get an Agile job?
I am quite of a nomad. So in the last 5 or 6 years, I've moved and worked with Agile teams in different roles in 5 countries: in Greece, in Romania, Spain, Germany, and now I just moved to the UK. So my adventure is quite adventurous. Yeah. It's not really as nice as it seems, because it's very tiring as well. But what I realized is, although these teams have different culture, they talk different languages, geographically totally different, their Agile journey is very similar. So we all have the same way of working in it. We just need to move together. It doesn't matter what language do you speak, where are you, what do you do. We all can do it.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So, great. Okay. By the way, a note to all the consensus talk speakers: you do get a thank you gift. I keep forgetting to share that, but it's you will get it afterwards, because we want to keep the pace up. Okay. Next is Raimund.
Yeah, hello. Before I start, I'd like to ask you a question. Is anybody in here who is just sitting here to spot any unicorns in my presentation? Hands up, please. Okay, those of you can relax. There won't be any unicorns. You can leave, take a cup of coffee, cup of tea, do whatever you want. No unicorns in my presentation, and that is by intentionally. Okay, I'm irritated by this monitor. Okay, my name is Raimund Specht. I'm from a company called Genua, like the city in Italy. We are next to Munich, and we build firewalls and VPN appliances. Not the kind of firewalls you use with your Windows or Mac PC at home to protect you from the big bad internet, but we focus on high security market. Our customers are many parts of the German government, German military, but also private companies. I'm involved as a tester for the high-end product of our company. It's a firewall which exists for about 15 years, and I'll tell you about the history a bit. Long time ago, the development process was quite chaotic, which means there was actually no process. If some employee talked to a customer who demands for a new feature, or some employee has an idea for a feature of its own, then he went to a developer, told about this feature, and if the developer was in the mood to implement it, then the feature got implemented. If not, well, then not. So the employee could try to find another developer who wants to implement the feature, or he could simply cry or shout loud enough to get his feature implemented. And of course, there were many differences between the needs of the customer, then the needs that our employee understood, and the things that the developer thought the customer needed. And so many people were unhappy. About 5 years ago, we switched to Agile, and things improved much. We had a clear process of how new features come into the product. There's no longer a situation where someone promises a feature to one of our customers without the development team knowing about that feature. That happened also in the past. We said, okay, someday in the future, we will have implemented that feature, and nobody knew about it who could actually implement it. Okay, our product is certified by the German Bundesamt für Sicherheit in der Informationstechnik, something like the German Federal Office for Information Security, and they demand special development process. We have like something like a 6I principle. We have one developer who changes the code, another one who does a review, and by the way, we do have quite positive outcomes of the review process, and a third developer, usually a senior developer who knows the system best, integrates the changes in our baseline code. And about 2 years ago, the German Federal, or the BSI, what this office is called, demanded that we need external testers that are not developers. By the way, when you switched to Agile, our developers started doing tests too. They write low-level tests, unit tests, integration tests, but they also do part of exploratory tests. But the BSI wanted external tests, and that's where I came in. I was supposed to do these external tests, which are independent of the developers, and of course automate these tests. Test automation is of course important, but especially for us, because every release, we release twice a year, we change the underlying operating system of our product, which we very heavily depend on, and chances are quite high that something breaks when we do this. So we need good automated coverage of our features to find any bugs. Okay, what did I do? I was supposed to write as many tests as possible in a short time, because the audit of the BSI was soon. And I thought, okay, we are a firewall. One of our main purposes is to check connections. So I started writing scripts that do, for example, TCP connections from different source IPs to different destination IPs and ports. And I can write quite many test cases in a short time. But I need something to automate these tests. I didn't have the time to evaluate the different numerous products that are on the market. So I invented my own thing. And the good message is it's a quite stable thing. In the last 2 years, when we used it, there were almost no changes. It works since then almost unchanged. We just extended a bit to support a greater virtualization environment, or we switched our version control system, and so we had to change our scripts a bit. Okay, what do we do? All our tests are simple scripts. The programming language doesn't matter. It can be Unix shell, it can be Perl, it can be Ruby, it can be whatever you want. The only requirement is a certain output that these scripts produce. And basically, we have several test cases in our scripts. And we say, okay, test case 1, was okay, and then we have a short comment what this test does. Then test case 2 was not okay. Again, a short comment was what the test is expected to do, and then we can have some debug output that helps us to find the bug what didn't work in this test. Okay. Now we have scripts that produce okay, not okay, okay, not okay. And we collect the output of these scripts, put them in our version control system so that we know exactly what test ran against what version of our software and what was the outcome. We archived this. We can later look on it to find out what change produced the bug or introduced the bug. And we have some system to visualize this. It's also an open source system that just lists all out of our test cases, all of our test scripts, and one can easily see, okay, this one succeeded, this one produced a failure. And to make a long story short, I think we are quite successful with what we did. The last major new feature we released in April this year, hasn't so far no bugs that were found by the customer. There was just one minor missing feature, but that was due to the very loose contract between us and the customer we built this feature for, which just were about 10 sentences. That's very logical that we forget something with such a vague contract. Okay, that was my talk. Thank you for your attention.
Okay. Any questions for Raimund? You're all thinking of coffee. I think 1 minute closer to coffee. Maybe that's it. Okay, thank you, Raimund. And then we have Monika. And she's right, sorry. Okay.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Monika Januszek, and I work as QA engineer at Hybris, one of the global leaders at the e-commerce market. Sorry? Oh, okay. Our product is an enterprise framework for delivering e-commerce solutions. And this product is really big and complex, and it has to change and adapt fast to the growing needs of the market. What I am going to talk about is a methodology that builds on a keyword-driven testing approach and which has enabled us to create and maintain tests for our product. When we were starting the automation, we knew that the task we were facing was not going to be easy because we already have failed several times. We have tried record and replay approach. We have tried the modified record and replay. We also went for some more technical things like, for example, Java combined with Selenium RC. Unfortunately, those approaches did not work for us. However, those failures enabled us to identify two main challenges that we were facing during the automation. First of those challenges was the maintenance. With our product, we knew that we were going to face changes in the concept of the application. We knew that we could expect changes in the interfaces. And we also knew that we could expect changes in the methodologies that we were using. Another thing that we could expect and that we anticipated is that as we are delivering product and not a short project, the amount of tests would be growing, and we will need to maintain those tests. The second challenge we had was the cooperation. Basically, again, the size of the product is so big that testers cannot know everything. They cannot know it all, and they need support during the automation. They need support from everywhere, from the business people and from the developers. However, it is difficult to get those people to communicate. And this is not because they don't want to. It's because their experience, what they know and how they talk, they speak completely different languages. This is why they have problems communicating. So before we tried next time with the automation, we did a research. We have looked far and deep, and finally we decided that the approach that we were going to use was keyword-driven testing. We even selected a framework that was going to support us. We chose Robot Framework. However, from this very beginning, we saw that the keyword-driven testing is simply still not enough to answer those challenges. This is why we have come up with the idea of layered keyword-driven testing that addresses both challenges. How? It's all about layers. Now, imagine your test case is a story. The story consists of sentences. The sentences are built of words, and words are built of the letters. We have divided our keywords into 3 layers, 3 logical layers. The first layer consists of what we call high-level keywords. This layer corresponds to the business logic of the application under test. Here, in this layer, we build a domain-specific language for the application we are testing. And this layer contains and talks only about the business goals that we want to test. The second layer consists of what we call drivers. Those could be drivers those drivers correspond to the interfaces of the application under test. And those interfaces, this could be graphical user interface, this could be web service interface. It's of no consequence, we can handle them both. What is important here is that this layer is really speaking about the interfaces, and it brings in more information that is just necessary to understand the business goal. The final layer consists of what we call low-level keywords. And those keywords correspond to the basic operations that can happen on your application. Basically, this is your technology-facing layer. Now, those layers are separated, and any changes on the corresponding level of the application are affecting only one of the layers of our keywords. Now, how's a test written in this way look like? Here, you can see a test case. Our story is employee wanting to support a customer during checkout. And the one of the sentences in the story is that we need to add products to the cart. This is one of the sentences. This is our high-level keyword. As you can see here, there are only 2 important things here: amount and which product. If we dig deeper, you can see here that this sentence is built of drivers. You can see here that there is one more thing. You need to have additional information. Our application, in this case, has tabbed design. This was not relevant for the business goal. It is relevant now if you want to achieve that goal. And finally, digging deeper, if you want to actually add something to that cart, you need to click a button or whatever it is in this case. Here, you can see some technical things hidden. In this case, there are some XPath expressions. Those could be web service calls. That is really of no consequence here. We are hiding those technical aspects behind these keywords. Now, what are our benefits here? We endorse cooperation between people. By allowing them to work within their comfort zone, we allow people to contribute. And by allowing people to contribute, we also endorse responsibility. So our business owners can work on this highest layer of the keywords. And they will feel comfortable because they will know and they will understand what they have written. Our developers can work on the lowest level. Also, readability is increased. As you could see, it is very easy to drill in, but the test case itself is also very understandable. Maintenance is also much easier. Well, sometimes it can be as easy to fix several test cases as just to fix one keyword, as long as you do the reusability. And especially keywords on the lowest layer are very reusable. And finally, this approach is very easy to learn because that's how people think. Thank you.
Thank you, Monika. Questions for Monika? Yeah, I see a hand.
Where would you say was the most change? In the lower level keywords, in the higher level keywords, or in the middle?
Well, the thing is that these lowest level keywords, they are really facing the technology. So if you're not changing your technology you are using, let's say you're sticking to web interface, right? Then your keywords on the lowest layer will, once they are built, probably remain the same for a long time. However, if, for example, your design of your application changes, then this middle layer will be affected. If your requirements change, the top layer will be affected. But the effect on different layers will be much less, if not completely removed.
Thank you.
We have time for one more question.
How much effort did you have to put into maintaining this infrastructure, updating drivers, etc.?
Well, this again depends on how you have designed your architecture from the very beginning. Initially, it is probably even more effort than with the keyword-driven testing. However, as you continue with your project, this maintenance effort will be much lower. It's just like with any other software project. If you do the architecture right and your design right, you won't need to put in that much effort. I hope this answers your question.
Okay, thank you, Monika.
Thank you.
And next is Gáspár.
Good. So, hello, my name is Gáspár Nagy. I work as a developer coach at TechTalk, and I have also created the BDD framework for .NET, which is called Specht. This is an open source stuff. That's what I'm more known of. I would like to start this shortened version of this presentation where the usual BDD or ATDD talks end. So let's suppose that you already have a working BDD or ATDD test system. And probably then you will have some scenarios or features like this with nice given, when, then keywords or any other alternative, doesn't really matter. Hopefully you also have an application that was built on that. The tests are running on that, they are green. So that's what we have already. So let's see what we can get more. And what I would like to show you or share with you is 12 additional IDs, 12 IDs about how much other values, how much other benefits you can get out of this existing test system. And these are IDs, so I'm not having a ready-to-run tool for that, but I have prototyped the majority of them, so I know that they are working at least in the world of unicorns. I would like to ask you to count how many of these 12 you find interesting, not necessarily adaptable for your product, but at least interesting, because that would be an interesting feedback for me. Okay, so let's first try to measure things. So if I run my test and I measure the execution time, then I get a number which doesn't tell too much. It doesn't tell too much because, unfortunately, it also contains the time that was taken for the precondition and for the validation, which is not so important information. Actually, what we want to do, we want to concentrate on the then part, which is this is the actual steps that are executing our application. However, since we have a structured test, we can actually measure the execution time only of the then part. So with this number, we can basically get a so-called performance test for free. Okay, maybe this is not so interesting. However, if you have done this on the day 1 and also on the day 2 of your sprint and the further days, and you just capture these numbers, then by looking at these numbers, you can maybe identify points in time or points or dates where the execution time of this particular feature has been increased dramatically or at least significantly. And if you set up a watchdog or some kind of notification system for that, then what you can get is a so-called performance guard, something that protects you against changes that having a high performance impact. I would love to have that. Of course, you cannot only measure time, but you can also measure memory consumption. So similarly to the previous one, you can measure for example, the peak memory usage of the execution. You can also put it in the time horizon. You can also set up the same watchdog for that, and you have a similar memory guard that is checking your changes. Instead of measuring the peak memory, you can also measure the difference between the initial and the final memory usage of, for example, the then part. And the difference is basically giving you some information about the memory footprint of your features. Or, in some cases, you can run the scenarios twice after each other and compare the end memory usage of the 2 runs. And the difference is, if it's not 0, it's potentially a memory leak. Maybe you should investigate that. OK. So after measuring, let's try to multiply the things. So we have seen that it's good when our tests are running and green, but sometimes, unfortunately, they are breaking. Especially if they are breaking on the build server, it's a relatively complicated investigation process what is actually causing this failure. However, if you have a little bit more smart execution system, which is in this case retries that and maybe retries it once more, then actually what you've got, you have separated the failures, the random failures from the constant failures, which can be a very good input for the investigation process. So you know where to start this. Also, again, we have a structured test, so actually we can also detect if the failure itself was during the execution of the given part, so basically the execution of the preconditions. And if this was happening, then probably this is not even a business failure, but some kind of test or environment issue. So again, you can start the investigation or the management of this problem differently. OK. Also, we can multiply for different platforms. In this example, I have used a web platform, but if it's a mobile application, then different mobile devices or whatever you can imagine. Of course, you can run the tests through different browsers, so you get a cross-browser test, that's clear. However, what you can also do, that you can run these tests against the different browsers, and at certain points in time, we have a structured test, so we can guess some good times like the end of the then part, or beginning or end of the then part, and take screenshots. And if you have these screenshots with the different browsers and apply some little bit fuzzy comparison for that, then actually what you can get is a cross-browser rendering test. So basically you can spot out CSS or any other issues with your browsers, which can be done only with manual testing. OK. After multiplying, let's try to share and link the information that we have with these tests. For that, first, let's run the test in a little bit of special mode, with a kind of interception mode, which means that while I'm running the test, I'm also checking what kind of UI controls are exercised during the execution of the test. So let's say that in this example, this particular test was actually pressing the pause button somewhere behind. So if we remember that and we store this information, then afterwards, in the real application, which is shown to the end users, I can mark these controls. So I can mark this pause button with a small and ugly eye, where if the users are hovering their mouse or clicking on that, they can see what features, what scenarios are related to this button. And if you have something like this, that this is basically a context-sensitive online help, or if this sounds too annoying, then you can maybe just set it up in the beginning period of the time, and then you have a kind of training mode. OK. with this information, you can also have a different version of your application, different annotated version of your application, where you can, for example, annotate the buttons with a green bar, which are well covered with automated tests, and with a red bar, which are less covered with automated tests, which can be a great help for a manual tester who is doing exploratory testing, because they know which part of the application are more or less covered. So this is like a visual test coverage that you can get out of that. And finally, you can also run the test in a classical recording mode, where the execution result is somehow saved to a video file. And if you have a working BDD system and you have a living documentation, which is basically an online browsable catalog of the features and the scenarios you have, and then you can link these video files to that. So if someone is reading your scenario, they can immediately watch how the related screencast looks. And with that, basically, you get a kind of video tutorial or demo mode of your application. Good. So that was the 12th ID that I had. And I'm interested, how many of you were interested in less than 4 IDs? Okay, between 4 and 8. Okay, more than 8? Great. Okay, so what I can suggest, even though it doesn't matter if you have or don't have yet such a system, think about this additional benefit. This is increasing the ROI of this, and all of these IDs need some investment, but this investment is not scaling with the number of tests, so it's a constant investment from this point of view. So I think if this fits to your situation, then it definitely makes sense to try out. I was also trying to put some of these IDs into these background tools. Okay, thank you very much.
BDD at turbo speed, 12 values in less than 10 minutes. So there must be some questions, I guess.
Thank you for presentation. It was quite interesting. Just I didn't get whether this tool that you were showing is tool that you have developed, or the SpecFlow or Spec Overflow. What was the name?
SpecFlow is a BDD tool like Cucumber. It's just a .NET variant of Cucumber. This sample application was just a sample. It was just a joke. So any web application you can imagine here, or any application actually.
Okay.
Hi, I think all of these ideas look great, but how do we vote on what we think is the most important? How are you going to take this forward from here?
Well, I think usually the good answer is that step by step. But I think the point is that for example, for us, we have realized with a special runner, which is similar to NUnit, which is also not a very complex product, especially if you customize it for a concrete need. You can run quite easily these tests in a way that you can do whatever you want in the meanwhile. So you can really just put some measurement points, and then you can select the measurement results. If your product is anyway bound to a specific CI server like TeamCity or whatever else you use, then these servers are usually having their hooks that you can feed some additional information that gets into the report. Then setting up a watchdog is again something that you can do manually, combining the existing tools. So I'm not dreaming of a big system that does all this, but rather combining small existing IDs and then try to do it step by step.
Gáspár, first of all, thanks a lot for developing that, because I use Cucumber. I don't work in .NET, but of course, guys like you make our life much easier. But one thing I wanted to ask you, how many were there? 14 improvements? All of them are very much on the technical side.
Yes.
Okay? I think that the community should look at how we do better BDD, improving collaboration, how we do collaborate, how we share our feature files with the business, how we let them interact. There is a lot of, and it's great that you guys do this because it's going to be useful, but we lose a bit of the fact that we're doing BDD.
Yeah, actually, that's why I started this presentation, that I'm starting when the BDD presentation finishes. So I all agree of the BDD benefits, and I'm practicing that. But here I wanted to concentrate on these additional bonuses, which are not directly related to the benefit that BDD provides. I love BDD, and I think the sharing and all these other values are very important. I don't want to make them unemphasized or whatever. This is just something on top.
Thank you.
Okay. One final question?
There is. There.
No? Oh, yeah.
Relating to the other question of other features, which would be nice, is if you, I don't know if you if you saw the presentation of Paul this morning, of his BDD software. He's going from the other angle, from specifying the BDD cases, and also with a way to automate regression or to see what you can regress. That would also be a very nice linkage, because then you can, when you get a new change in there, you can actually specify which you need to test. Which is covered.
Exactly. This is also a great area of this impact analysis kind of or also auto testing, and all this area is also very interesting. And I was also dealing a little bit with that, but yeah, I agree. That's great. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Gáspár.
Thanks.